staying warm is essential when out photographing birds in winter. And especially for us wildlife photographers, we often sit still or lie still for hours on end trying to get our image. So we can easily get cold fast. My name is Espen Helland. I'm a wildlife photographer and an OMSYSTEM ambassador. In this video, I'm going to go over a few tips for winter bird photography. I don't know about you, but once my hands become numb, that's it. It's game over for me. I can't photograph anymore. And as you can see here as well, I dress up well with a down jacket, salopette trousers. I got boots on with woolen socks inside. For my hands, I use a pair of thick, dedicated photography gloves, or I use my woolen mittens, which actually has an additional finger for my index so I can photograph with them.
So when it is really cold, best thing to do, put hand against skin to warm up quickly. But yeah, minus 26 this morning. I've been out there for 40 minutes. You know, they say this gear can go down to minus 10. Obviously it can go down to a lot colder than that. I've absolutely no issues. You know, filming or taking photos, it all works as it should, and that is important to me. You know, I come to places like this to photograph, and I need gear that I can trust.
As batteries can drain quite fast in the winter, a handy thing to do is keep your spare batteries close to your body to keep them warm. When you go back into a warm house after a photography session, be sure to leave your camera gear in the bag to adjust to the heat. What I tend to do is take my SD cards and my batteries out of the camera before I go into the house. That way I can back up my photos and I can recharge my batteries and just leave my gear in the bag. Getting a correct exposure in a snowy environment like this can be a bit tricky. Your camera is going to want to adjust for all this brightness, and it's going to darken the scene. If you are in semi-automatic mode, you use exposure compensation. I tend to shoot in full manual, so I tend to either raise my ISO or lower my shutter speed. My f-stop is usually as wide open as I can get it anyway. One thing to know is that birds don't always behave, and they're not always found in the same places that you might find them in spring and summer in winter. So, for instance, here in the UK, if you go into a woodland in winter, you might think that there are no birds there, because very often it is completely silent and you can't see any birds. So what happens then is that in winter, smaller birds will often forage in bigger flocks. Even several different species together will kind of forage through a woodland. And that means that they have more eyes, they can look out for predators. So you really want to just listen and walk around and try to find a flock like that. Once you find it, stick with it. Some of my favorite birds to photograph in these mixed species flocks is going to be the long-tailed tit and the tree creeper. The long-tailed tit you can usually find at the very tips of branches. It is such a small and light bird. And the tree creeper is actually on the trunk of the tree. It will climb up the tree and it will pick up little bits of bark and moss and these kind of things, and it will pick off invertebrates underneath that. To photograph that though, you're going to want to use a slightly higher shutter speed because it moves up quite quickly. If I have the light, I'll try and do 5/100th of a second shutter, but in winter time, you don't always get the light, and in a woodland it could be quite dark. So 250th of a second can also work. I tend to take a burst of images so that at least some of them will come up sharp. Dippers are one of my favorite subjects, no matter what time of year. I've seen this bird jump under the ice to go feeding in the water underneath for invertebrates. Such a hardcore bird. Here in the UK, we can't always guarantee a winter in the lowlands, so I like to come to a place like this, the Scottish Highlands, and you can very often find snow here throughout winter. And I like to come here to photograph probably my favorite bird to photograph in winter, and that's a ptarmigan. And the ptarmigan changes its plumage, so it looks white in winter, and it really blends in with the snow here. Whenever you do get a day of snow or frost or these kind of amazing conditions that you really don't get that often, if you have the chance, get out there as much as you can this winter and really get those photos of birds in the snow or in the frost, because they can really enhance those images. Best of luck to you.